Emily Elizabeth, and I'm the host of the What Fulfills You podcast, a show for and about individuals always seeking to be their best selves. On this show, we talk all about building the mindset, finding the right careers, creating meaningful relationships, and so much more. Welcome to the What Fulfills You podcast.
Hello everyone. Happy weekend, I guess. Or maybe you're listening to this on another day, but welcome back to another episode of the What Fulfills You podcast. Today's episode is a fun, quick bonus one and something that I was reflecting on for a few weeks and was thinking, hey, maybe I should share this with the podcast, which is usually how my thought process goes, especially for short bonus episodes like this. And so, as you can probably tell from the title, this is revolving around kind of the thought process of who you are seeking advice or feedback from. And to me, this heavily relates to that statement of you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with most, because the people you surround yourself with, you are often seeking their input and or advice, whatever that looks like. But that's why, to me, it's also very important that you have a large circle, in a sense, to go to when you want to ask for feedback. Because from my observations, I've noticed some people often go to the same group of friends or even family members for multiple areas of life. And I would argue that it's actually a lot better to have more variety in the people you ask, because at some point, if you're asking the same people for feedback on multiple areas of life, that includes dating and work and all that. And I think this is especially for like mom-daughter relationships. If you're super close with your mom, you might go to your mom for a lot, which is great. However, you gotta realize, moms, for example, they're always going to have their own bias and emotional connection, especially to you if you're their daughter, because that's just how it is. And that's amazing. And they're going to always love you and look out for you. But that also creates a little bit of a blind spot for a mom giving feedback to daughter. Again, not all the time, but that's why I always recommend to not only get more than one piece of input or feedback, but to also try to ask people that are more outside of your circle. So people you still trust and are relatively close to, but not the closest people to you in your life, right? And the reason for that is because most of the time they're going to be able to give you a more larger macro perspective, and they're less emotionally charged per se in maybe like a situation you're dealing with. They're kind of able to take the emotion out of it more because they're not as, close to you. But with that being said, I wrote down a few bullet notes that I think everyone should consider, especially if you have been realizing that you don't have the best types of people to go to when it comes to seeking for feedback or advice. And I want to preface, I've mentioned this in past episodes before, but I'm not big on giving advice or asking for advice because, and this was also mentioned to me by my psychologist, but he also said that people often give advice to soothe their own anxiety. And that's also why he doesn't give advice. And I thought about it heavily in reflection of like when I had a parent trying to give me advice, or I had a friend that was heavily trying to push her, bias per se. And it wasn't like in a bad way, right? It actually often comes from a loving place because they care a lot. But in reflection, I did notice the ones that wanted to offer more advice were trying to soothe something from their past and almost trying to tell their younger self what they wish they knew. However, the issue with that is over-identifying with their old self as you. And so in my experience, for example, like a parent might be envisioning their younger self in me. And yeah, for me, it's actually, very different. Like I'm very different from this person giving me or trying to give me advice. And so it's really difficult because it doesn't apply. But anyways, I just wanted to give some questions for you guys to think about. And the first one is, does this person have a good balance between rational thinking and compassion/empathy. I find this one super important, especially because you want to be getting feedback from people that can remove the emotion or like overly feeling from the decision or thought process, because if you are involved in whatever it is that you're seeking advice from, whether it's business or relationships or friendship conflict, you are already emotionally charged. So you want to hear it from a pretty rational thinking person, but also someone that isn't too utterly logical where they forget the part about human dynamics. Again, especially if something that you're dealing with and you're trying to get feedback on involves other humans, right? So that's why the balance between rational thinking and compassion is important. Now, to me, there's two ways to go about it, and I've done both. Sometimes when I'm talking to guys or my best guy friends, I notice that, maybe 80% of the time they are giving their perspective more from like a calm, rational thought process. But luckily for me, actually, my guy friends, they are all very into personal development and they practice it themselves. And we kind of all push each other to, move the needle forward and ensure that we are working on ourselves. But my guy friends, they do actually have a great balance between rational thinking and compassion and empathy. They're able to put themselves in the shoes of the other person and try to reiterate that to me, but also because they're not involved in whatever it is, they're able to share more of an outsider perspective, which is really healthy. Now, if you don't have the blessing of that, where you have, let's say, like friends or guy friends that have both, then what I often do is maybe I'll ask a guy friend that I trust that maybe could be more logical, rational. And then I also ask a girlfriend that I know also has compassion and empathy. And I really try to kind of like find the middle ground between what they both say and their feedback. And it doesn't always have to be two people, you guys. It could be 3, 4, whatever. It could be one person. It doesn't matter. But make sure it's someone that you trust, obviously. And when I say trust, it not just means like trust that person as a friend or whoever, but also you trust their judgment. You have seen them make their own decisions and you see how that plays out. And so I would say that's number one, is just finding a person or people that have a good balance between rational thinking and compassion and empathy. One of my biggest priorities is ensuring that I optimize my health every single day to the best of my ability in all areas, including mentally, physically, and emotionally. That also includes what I am eating and drinking every day, because we know that does affect our energy. And so I ensure that I'm intaking healthy nutrients with the drink Magic Mind. And it's something that I've actually been taking for over a year now. If you've been listening for a while, you know they've been a long-time sponsor. And what Magic Mind really is, it is a productivity shot with nootropics, adaptogens, and matcha. Also, if you are not aware, there's a lot of health benefits with adaptogens, which I won't get into, but just trust me, look it up, do the research yourself, and you will see what the long-term effect is of intaking adaptogens and nootropics. So how I take this, I typically drink it in the morning, take a sip of it, and to be honest, sometimes I drink 2, which is technically what we're not supposed to do, but they did say it is okay for me to do so, but they do recommend just taking 1 per day. And after I drink this, about 30 minutes in, I start to feel really focused, calm, and especially in flow. That's just the best way I could describe it. And for those of you who also love coffee like me, you can drink it alongside with your coffee or before, afterwards. It really doesn't matter. So it doesn't mean that you have to cut out coffee or anything, because for me, I actually still drink both. But Magic Mind is really kind of that healthy kick for me, and I just know the amazing health benefits that nootropics and adaptogens have. If you are interested in trying, they come in a box of 15, and I highly, highly recommend just give it a try. So you can get 20% off your purchase with the code FULFILL at magicmind.co/fulfill. Again, that is 20% off your purchase with the code FULFILL at magicmind.co/fulfill. The second question to consider, and this is particularly in times of conflict or trying to better understand another person's view, so this is for sure when you're dealing with human dynamics, is this person similar to the person you're dealing with? So my best example would be in dating and relationships. more often than not, I am definitely going to my male friends to ask for their thoughts, input, and feedback, because it kind of doesn't make sense to ask my gals what a guy is thinking when they are not a guy, and vice versa. If you are a guy listening, you probably don't want to go to another guy to figure out how a woman is thinking, right? And of course, like, men are different, women are different, so we're not all the same. But that's why ideally, in a perfect world, you could have a few to ask. And I'm very fortunate to have that in my corner, where I do have a few different guy friends that I trust and am able to go to and ask for their feedback if I want to say something or do something. And maybe it's because I'm like, I don't know, hesitating or overthinking. I often will go to them and present with them like the specific thing I'm hesitating on. And every time I talk to these guys, they always make me feel more clear and more certain of, okay, I maybe I was overthinking it, or maybe it's like, okay, got it. That's not weird for me. You know what I mean? And ideally, you don't want to do it on every single thing, but mainly if it's like a macro decision or something that is, I guess, like heavy on you, definitely I think it's great to be able to go to male counterparts and ask for their thoughts. And the one thing too is, you guys got to remember, like, there is a huge difference between how men and women think and how they handle certain things. And I think the best thing you can do as well is, besides just getting as close to the person you're dealing with, so obviously, like, that would be like, you know, their gender. Another thing to consider is their temperament, right? So to be honest, like, if you have a person that you're dealing with, like, outside of romantic relationships, I'm saying, let's say in like friendship conflict, for example, if your friend tends to be more emotionally reactive or something of that nature, maybe asking a friend that also has a similar temperament, asking them kind of their perspective, because they most likely will be able to tell you from a lens of someone that's emotionally reactive. You know what I mean? And that's not like a bad thing. It's just saying, like, hey, you know, like, for me, I practice stoicism. I've practiced it for many years now. And so sometimes it has been difficult for me to understand, like, okay, what is the best approach for someone that maybe is more hypersensitive than me, right? I want to make sure I'm thoughtful and understanding in that process. And if you ask another stoic person, someone that's more even keeled, they're not going to be able to understand the temperament of a person that's more emotionally reactive, unless that's, you know, maybe let's say that's part of their work, unless they study psychology and they understand it better. But that's why it is nice if you can kind of have that self-awareness of, okay, this person is more like this. And I know this friend has maybe experience with it or better understanding. I think their judgment's going to be the best for me. Does that make sense? Again, don't overthink it. It's just that I've noticed people maybe asking the same friend or same group of friends for, again, multiple different topics in life, or maybe like they keep going to the same friend who's not giving the best feedback on dating and relationships, or maybe that person doesn't even have any experience with dealing with that situation. And what I find is, if you go to those people without the experience or proximity to like the person you're dealing with, then you're going to probably be a little bit more unclear or uncertain of what to do or how to approach it. And for me, when I'm going to get feedback, it's all about gaining clarity and trying to be more solid in my approach, and especially more thoughtful. And the last question I would ask myself is, does this person hold back, or do they have guts? In other words, do they often make decisions in their life that you admire? This is very important, and I bring this up because I remember I was sharing with a close guy friend. I was like telling him, hey, like, I actually did this recently, blah, blah, blah. I know that sounds very, ballsy, whatever. Like, whatever I did was very gutsy. And he was like, what the fuck? Like, you did that? That's crazy. And he was saying like, oh, like, he kind of looked at me like I wouldn't have done that. And I already did it, and it was like a good result type of thing, good story. So I was in the process of sharing it with him. But I was telling him, well, like, don't worry. I actually asked a few other guy friends beforehand, just to like check myself, make sure like I felt confident in whatever I was like, whatever that was potentially holding me back. Just wanted to make sure that cleared up in my head. And he's like, oh, you didn't ask me. And I love him to death. And of course, I didn't say this. And mind you, I don't think this is ever offensive or meant to be offensive. But the truth is, like from this question, does this person hold back or do they have guts? And this friend of mine, he certainly holds back more than having guts. And that's not a good or bad thing. It's just a neutral statement, right? And so that was probably primarily why I didn't ask him in that. And he actually, funny enough, he goes to me often when it comes to question of pursuing something which requires guts. And so I felt like it didn't quite make sense to ask for feedback from this particular friend because I could already tell he wouldn't have had the guts to go and do this, and he might have tried to talk me out of it, which is not what I needed. And that's why I went to ask other guy friends who would have been able to give me some thoughtful feedback from their view, but also for me to specifically share with them, hey, like, I want to do this. I'm going to do this, especially when I'm in a state of peace. However, this is just the one thing that's holding me back. And this situation was obviously dealing with another guy. And so I felt like I needed a guy perspective on this. And that's why it was even better to express what that fear would look like. And then again, I love Ray Dalio. He says this, and I learned this from his book Principles. But if you're going to ask for thoughtful feedback, you want to try to get it from 2 to 3, ideally an odd number, people. And he says this even for like for an illness, or if you need to do like a big procedure, right? Ask 3 doctors and kind of find the common truth between what they're saying. And luckily in my scenario, in the 3 different guys I asked, and I kind of asked them like on like different angles, but pretty much they all had similar answers. And I think my main concern, which was my, I guess, like the fear that could have held me back, all 3 of them didn't even like acknowledge that as something that was worthwhile having a fear over, if that makes sense. And my biggest approach in life is carpe diem. It's that saying that I love to utilize, which is seize the moment. And to me, it's just a reminder of go for it, right? You know, I think there's nothing worse. And I have something which is just my skating career, like that I don't regret, but if there was one thing that I have any regrets on, it would be my figure skating career, in that I wish I tried harder. And so it does weigh heavy on me in a positive way, because it reminds me, don't look back and wish you did this, you know? Don't look back and wish you tried. Don't look back and wish you just went for it. I hate that feeling. I don't know about you guys, but it just doesn't sit well with me. And so that's why, even though the thing that I did, it was gutsy, it was also extremely worthwhile. And I saw the, I guess you could say, like the rewards from it. Like it ended up being a positive thing, and I'm really, really glad I did it. But looking back and seeing what was potentially holding me back, it was all fear. It was all mental. It was all, how is this going to be perceived type of thing. And in the end, when it's something like that, when the fear is how is this going to be perceived, or does it look like XYZ, you have no control over it. I didn't have control over it, right? It's the same thing as something as small as if I send this email, how is this person going to take it? Or if I say this to this friend, how is this person going to take it? Well, you can do your due diligence and your best to communicate with empathy and thoughtfulness and being kind and open. But at the same time, that's the most you can do, right? You can only control so much of your side. On the receiving end, that's all on them. You can't control that, and you have to accept that, you know? And like I said, it was really helpful to be able to have a few guy friends because of the situation to rely on for their feedback. And it really solidified for me, like, okay, I'm going to go do it. And knowing that these guys would call me out or tell me if they didn't think it was a good idea, it really gave me more clarity, like, all right, just go for it. So those were the main 3 questions I would say to really consider when it comes to who to seek feedback from. So again, number 1, does this person have a good balance between rational thinking and compassion/empathy? Number 2, is this person similar to the person you're dealing with in quote unquote in times of conflict, or when you need to try to better understand another person's view. So again, asking, like, if it's about dating or relationships, ask a guy, right? If you're a female dating a guy and vice versa. And the last question, does this person hold back or do they have guts? And, you want to go to people that make quality decisions in their life and you admire those decisions, because if you ask someone that holds back, they're likely going to have that bias and make you feel like you should hold back too. So that was all for today's episode. I hope this was helpful and provided some good reflection on maybe how you can approach finding better feedback and more thoughtful feedback from friends and peers and colleagues and whatnot. And if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to share this on your Instagram story, tag the podcast Instagram at whatfulfillsyou. And as always, all of the merch, especially the best-selling card game and journal, are available on the website at whatfulfillsyou.com. And you can get 10% off with the code whatfulfillsyou10 at checkout at whatfulfillsyou.com. Thanks again for tuning in. I will chat with you all in the next episode.